Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Living in the Limelight, an Anton Scholl and Friends podcast where we discuss music from the artist and fan perspective. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to another episode of Living in the Limelight. I'm your host, Anton Scholl, and today, very special guest, drummer extraordinaire, Sir Rob James. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful, Anton. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for getting in touch with me about this. This is very cool.
Oh yeah, been a long time. I was, I go over some of these people that I've been doing podcasts with. It's funny, we all kind of, it all kind of turns around. Everybody knows each other, And when I was like going through, I was talking to Dave. So Dave Cornwall, of course, being your bass player in the band and singer. We'll get into that real quick, but we were talking about how all of that just kind of comes around. Like I met you through Richard, who is now your guitar player. And then I met Rex from Stereo Rex through you. And now, of course, I met Dave, and it's just and then Dave, of course, was talking about Scott Rowe, and I interviewed him, and just all these people kind of know each other, and it's really great how I think that the Phoenix area it's not a competition for these bands. So I want to get into that. I'm excited to have you on because of all of the work that you've done out here, and of course our time together in a group. So here we go. You ready?
I'm ready. Shoot.
All right. Well, we're actually gonna take it way back first of all before we start talking about all of the work that you've done. Is when you realized that you wanted to become a musician and especially a drummer, because most people want to be a guitar player back in our day, But when did you start, and what started it for you?
Oh heck, I was probably 9 or 10 years old. My sister, I've got an older sister, and she was in the music program at school, which got me interested in it. And I started taking some classes. There was what really got me into the drumming. There was a school play, and the director, for whatever reason, decided I had a good sense of rhythm. And there was the final piece of the play that had a crucial bongo part that held the whole thing together. And he gave that to me, and I played the bongo part, held it all together. And from that day forward, decided that being a drummer was a good, strong thing. And then probably a couple of years later, I heard someone playing drums in the school concert band, and that was a drum set. Oh. And it's the first time I'd heard someone been in the presence of a drum set being played, and that was exciting to me. I could feel it. It was the backbone of everything, and at that point, I decided to play drum set, and got one for Christmas, and right at that time, I think that was right about the time that Rush's Moving Pictures had been released, and everything just kind of fell into place from there. So
that was the album. Was that the one that you said, okay, I'm listening to these drums and this is what I want to do?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Wow. I'd already gotten into rock music. I'd gotten into Kiss. I think one of the first albums I bought was Pete Townshend's Empty Glass. Terrific album, still one of my favorites to today. But that was Moving Pictures was when I really started honing in on the drum parts, and that was just the spectacular opening of the clouds and everything else. So,
well, I would think that for most people, and a lot of drummers will admit this, they hear Neil playing and they're like, nope, I have to, I'm going to start out with something else. I'm going to start out AC/DC. I'm going to start out, something, more 4/4, more something that I can get into to kind of learn. It surprises me and amazes me. Although now that I know how you play, it really doesn't. But to know that that was the start. People usually graduate into that. You pretty much just kind of jumped right in.
I mean, I didn't approach it from a perspective of what should I start off playing? What do I want to play? What can I play? I just heard Neil Peart and was just awestruck. Didn't matter that I couldn't play a lick like him.
Mhm.
I sat down and I played along to Red Barchetta. I have no idea what I was playing. I'm sure it wasn't even close to anything correct, but that was just the inspiration.
And so then at what point then did you guys start with Anthem? Was Anthem the first Rush tribute or was there one before that?
No, that was the first Rush tribute I'd played with, and that was probably, let me think, um, 20 years ago, something like that
Hmm.
now. And the guys in Anthem, Dale and Russ, a couple of great guys. They'd moved out to Phoenix from California. They'd been doing Anthem for several years out there with Russ's brother. And in all honesty, I think at that point, I only really knew one Rush song beginning to end. I'd learned a bunch of the riffs. I'd played around. I'd put them on the headphones, but never really sat there and learned it note for note.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, moving pictures was the inspiration. But then I quickly moved into other stuff and into school band and things like that, where no one's asking you to play Rush parts. So I never sat down and learned those songs start to end. I think maybe YYZ was about the only one that I was playing at the point that I joined Anthem, and was very excited at that point to actually start playing Rush music, and went and learned their entire set list of material start to finish. So,
Wow. And how
um,
did that come about then? So then they moved out here. They were already in Anthem. The two of them were already had the band. They moved
right.
out here and then you joined the group. And then you really expanded on that drum set, the module. I mean, all of that. Did that, a lot of people wouldn't go in as far as you did. You kind of went all in on a little bit of everything. How, was that just a conscious decision that you really wanted to go into this, full force? Or,
I mean, we ramped it up. We started playing out. I wasn't playing on a reproduction kit at that point. It was just my old Slingerland drum kit that I'd thrown a bunch of extra parts on so I could do a bunch of the Neil Peart stuff, and an electronic module to reproduce, the chimes and the things that I certainly couldn't afford or didn't want to haul around. So it was probably maybe about a year or so into working with Anthem, and Russ, the bass player, had a reproduction drum kit, black one. It was actually not a great quality set of drums, Keller shells, and just a reproduction that he had bought on the cheap, and had them. I think when he bought them, he had them put a bunch of Ludwig hardware on there or something. So I then spent several months getting that drum set into shape, putting the hardware on it, getting the front Man and Star drum heads done up, and all of the extra pieces and hardware, and piggybacking everything together, and finally got the reproduction drum kit up and running, which was very exciting. Um,
yeah.
it's one of those things where you go to play the Neil Peart parts and you make it work on your drums and everything's great. Well, you then sit behind the reproduction drum kit and everything's laid out properly, everything's tuned properly, and all of those parts just fall into place even just so much better. You know, you're getting, Neil had a very, very specific way of tuning his drums. He had very specific sizes of his drums that he had kind of dialed in over the years. And like I said, the specific tunings. And once you figure out all of that stuff and get the proper drums tuned the proper way, all of those parts come together. And you're playing the fills top to bottom on the toms, and it sounds correct. And that was an exciting thing. And then I did make another step up about 2 years ago, I think it was. I finally, the old black drum kit was falling apart. Like I said, they were cheap Keller shells. One of the drums was actually misshaped and was breaking hardware, breaking heads, things like that. So I finally found someone near St. Louis that was selling an actual Tama Superstar Super Mahogany 1982 drum kit, essentially the one he was playing on Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures, the wood grain drum set. And I flew out to St. Louis. I rented a van. I bought the kit, and I drove it back to Phoenix. Excuse me.
Whoa. Wow.
And that was an even bigger step up, because the higher quality top end drums, again, tuned correctly, tuned with all the right heads. Right now I'm at a point where I think the actual drum set I'm playing is just the best I've ever sounded on those.
So what else do you have on there? I mean, aside, everybody obviously thinks when they see a drum set, they're thinking of the standard 5 or 7 piece set. Describe your set. Plus you also have a bunch of other attachments on that set. If you can describe that.
Sure. It's, I wish I had it set up. It's behind me in cases here. That doesn't really help. But so it's, as far as the number of pieces in the drum kit, generally you're counting bass drum, snare, and toms. It's an 11-piece drum kit. I've got a 1 timbali. Neil always used to use 2 timbalis. I've only got 1. I've got an electronic drum that is used for all kinds of doodads and bells and whistles and bell trees and chimes and gong bass drums. It's the gong bass drum, the huge ass bass drum he would have mounted behind him. That's one I don't have. I wish I did have, but I'm still using the electronics for that. The cymbals are all of the Zildjian cymbals he was playing back in the day. And there's probably 4, 5, 6, 7, about 12 cymbals, I think, on that drum kit, something like that.
Wow.
Couple of other toys, and then some electronic triggers around the drums.
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing set. It's just, when I have to tell you that I was asked to come by you, by Richard. I had known Richard a little bit before. We were kind of jamming a little bit. He had called me up and said, hey, you're a Rush fan. Why don't you come out, sing a couple of tunes, and, let's see what happens. I got a couple of guys out here who play some Rush music. And I was like, wow, sure. That's something I love, Rush music, and I was used to playing bass, but then I just kind of stopped playing after a period of time, just for kind of health reasons with my back and stuff. But I got to tell you, I came out and I was so impressed by the music that you guys played, how serious you took it. I'm from a jam type of a situation, I'm like, yeah, let's jam it out. I heard you guys play, and I got to tell you, I felt so intimidated by that, because I then had to be perfect. You know what I mean? Like, I had to come in at the right time. And I still remember we did one show and we were doing a newer Rush song that I honestly had never heard before. And I had to learn it. And I came in at the wrong time in the vocals. And I felt so terrible. I mean, I felt like I let everybody down, you know what I mean? But it was one of those things to where, like, you cannot you have to be on. It's not like, okay, the rhythm's going to play 4 times and then I start singing. No, not in Rush songs. I got to count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then come in, and
Well,
it became, what's that?
And the other thing that we kind of have to deal with is when you're doing a Rush tribute, the folks that come out to see your show, they know those parts inside and out.
Oh yeah.
They know those drum parts note for note. And if you're not playing them right, they notice. It's like doing an Eddie Van Halen guitar part in a Van Halen tribute and not hitting your parts right. People are going to notice. Right. People are going to go home and they're going to say, yeah, they were okay, but they weren't hitting all the notes. And people get picky about that because when I've gone to see Rush tributes, I do the same thing myself.
Of course. And everybody does the drums. Everyone air drums, out there. Even the girls that are in the audience, they're air drumming. And boy, I got to tell you, I would imagine that you probably get really freaked out when you're doing Tom Sawyer because everyone air drums that part.
Everyone does. Yep. It's in all honesty, man, I'm usually so dialed in and concentrating on what I'm doing. It's difficult for me to really even pay much of attention to what's going on outside of the drums and the stage. But I also wanted to take a quick moment to kind of let everyone know, in case they don't, kind of how Anthem and Freewill evolved and your participation. So like I was saying, when I joined Anthem, there was Dale and Russ in the band. Dale was playing guitar and singing, and Russ was playing bass and keyboards. So we weren't exactly doing the right lineup. Dale was then poached by Dave into Freewill. And that's where we hooked up with Richard, and then Richard brought you in to sing. So we actually became a 4-piece Rush tribute, which some people complain about, but who cares? And so then Anthem folded probably 8 years ago, something like that. And after I moved up here to Payson, that's when Dale was still playing with Dave in Freewill, and they called me up and asked if I'd be interested in playing with them. And then Dale had some hand surgery issues that he went through. So that's when we brought in Richard. And yeah, kind of like you say, there's that tight networking. Everyone knows each other. And it's even more so in some of these tribute areas, especially things like the Rush or the Van Halen. Richard also plays, has in the past played Van Halen tributes, doing an amazing job of playing Eddie's parts. I played with him in oh gosh, I can't even remember what the band was called, but that was with Roddy as well. And again, those tight circles, because you get the Rush guys, not everyone knows all the parts to the Rush tunes, but the guys that have been in the Rush projects have. And so, there's those tight circles, and we poach from each other, and I don't think there's any hard feelings about any of it. It's just kind of how things roll. So
right. Well, it really seems like it's honestly the great lineup that you have right now, because with Dave on vocals and bass and doing all of the Geddy stuff, you're doing the Neil stuff, Richard's doing Alex. I mean, everything is now kind of, in perfect sync, and it's really a great band. And I know that even before that, I was talking to Dave about it. He went really into it. He was doing like the dryers on stage and all of the different things, back in the day. And I was surprised about how, like, the tribute bands that you're in also, that the change, because let's talk about some of the other tribute bands that you were involved in because it's really a huge difference in, let's say going from Rush going to, the Eagles or something like that. You know what I mean? So, like, what other tribute bands have you gone in, and what kind of transition was that for you?
Well, you mentioned Eagles. quite a few years back. I was one of the founding members, and we pulled together a band called Take It to the Limit. That was a wonderful Eagles tribute. They have, I think, several of those members have also now gone on and they've reformed as One of These Nights. You'll probably see them playing around town. Terrific Eagles tribute. I played with, like I said, with Richard in Van Halen tribute. One of the best bands, one of the best lineups I ever played with was a Leonard Skinner tribute called Second Helping. We had a 3-guitar lineup that learned all of the right pieces for the right players. They had the right sounds for Steve Gaines and Gary Rossington and so forth. We had keyboard player Dave Hecker, who was just absolutely next level. I mean, he had all of those Billy Powell parts down note for note and was so strong. And then Fred Flory was singing for us. It was just a fantastic band. Like I said, one of the best lineups I've ever been part of. And so, yeah, it's interesting because, you kind of have to dig deep into the library of a band in a way that you don't, you're doing an Eagles cover or a Skinner cover as part of a cover band. It's certainly not the same as digging out every hit of theirs, a few deep cuts, and learning that catalog inside and out. And again, the way I've always approached the tribute projects is it's not a cover band, it's a tribute band. People are expecting to hear things like the album.
Yeah.
And that's what I've always kind of strove for when I've done the tribute projects. And it makes it a lot more, I don't know if I would say a lot more fun. It's just a lot more time intensive to learn all that material. And I get a real charge out of hitting that stuff note for note. And, people come up to you after a show and are just, they say, it sounds like the record. It sounds like the record.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for. That's exactly what we're looking for. So.
Well, then there was a bit of a change too, because you were in Ryzen for a while, and that was just a cover that just did all sorts of covers, correct?
I was in Ryzen for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And several cover bands as well. But Ryzen was probably one of the bands that I spent some of the longest time with, probably, I don't know, maybe 8 years, 10 years or something with Ryzen. When I joined, it was a 5-piece, I believe. We then evolved again. Fred Flory was in that band when I joined. He left. We brought in Paulie DeSimone, who I had played with in original projects, a band called Toonsmith, which was just a real highlight of anything I've ever done, was the original work we did with Toonsmith. A lot of fun. Got a couple of great albums out of it. But anyway, we brought Paulie into Ryzen. He was a 3rd guitar player, and actually that same 3-guitar player lineup were the guys that were in Second Helping, the Skinner tribute. So Ryzen was just a really unique cover band that we had 3 guitar players, myself and a bass player. All of us sang. All of the guitar players could switch out on keyboards, so we were able to throw keyboards into songs easily and still have 2 guitar players playing. We could do 3, 4-part harmonies. It was an incredibly fun band and just a wonderful, tight group of guys. And still love those guys. Still talk to them all the time. Joey Carter on guitar, Ron Snyder on guitar, and Paulie DeSimone. I want to give a shout out to those guys because they were just a fun group of guys to play with. So
yeah, you've really jammed with a lot of the great musicians out here, and it's really kind of like again, it's amazing how everything kind of all comes around. The names you're mentioning, are, all people that I have either seen in the past or heard of in the past. And it's got to be good to go through that and to jam with all these different musicians and have all of these different styles. It kind of shows you as an artist and you as a drummer how you can switch from going from, one level to another and always keeping that high level of performance going. So, and then of course, I can't thank you enough for doing what you did for me. I dragged you up into a studio and you played on one of my original songs, which I
That's
certainly
right.
do appreciate.
That's right. That
That was a lot of fun,
Blink of an Eye, I
Blink of an
think was
eye.
the
Yeah.
song. And
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
guys haven't checked out Anton's solo stuff, it's original stuff. It's terrific. Really great stuff. So
Oh, well, thank you.
definitely give
Appreciate
that
that.
stuff a
Thank you.
listen as well. So
Yeah, always good to have a bunch of different musicians involved in that and, and try to get people out there. So now where are you at right now? What are you doing right now in terms of music? Do you still have a lot of these bands going? And what do you have going on right now?
So when I moved up to Payson, and that was about 7.5 years ago, I basically just stopped doing the music for a while. Moved up here, and of course, immediately found a band that needed a drummer, and joined that band. Bands up here tend to be there's fewer bands, fewer venues, but there's still plenty of work. So I found that was a band called Plum Crazy, another really good bunch of guys from up here. But within my first summer of being here, I was playing every weekend, and that's something that I'd done in the Valley for a long, long time. But I was trying to kind of step away from being that busy with things. So I gracefully ducked out of that project. And was doing Freewill, pretty much only Freewill for a couple of years. And the thing I like about Freewill is we don't generally do like bar gigs. We're doing higher end gigs. Dave has been doing that project. This is actually the 2024 is the 30th anniversary of him doing it. So he knows a lot of people. The band has a good reputation, and we get some really nice shows. So it's not playing out every weekend in bars, which is a step up, which is great. So then about 2.5 years ago, maybe even close to 3 years ago or so, I met a gentleman up here, a guitar player named JC Choate, who's a great guitar player. And we found that we had a common real love for 90s rock. So we started putting together a 90s rock band, which we one thing I didn't want to do was just play all of the same songs that I've been playing for years. I think what happens is a lot of guys get together, they say, let's put a band together. And we all know already these 20, 30 songs. So we're going to start our set list with those songs. So what happens is, and I saw this down in Phoenix, you get a lot of the cover bands that, well, half of their set list is the same songs. And I wanted to do something that didn't have the same songs everyone was doing. So we kind of started from scratch, and we spent a good couple of years putting this project together until we started playing out. We didn't start playing out until last spring, so just about a year ago. We're called OK Hotel. That was one of the venues in the Seattle music scene. And there's just 3 of us. JC's on guitar, a gentleman named Bruce David, who's a terrific bass player, and myself. And now for the first time in this band, I am doing all of the lead vocals as well as the drums.
Wow.
And I'll be honest, we're putting backing tracks in there as well. So I'm the only one singing, and we're doing some backing tracks to get the backing vocals in there, which that's another challenge that I've been dealing with, is putting all of those tracks together. And it's another really fun things. So that project's really good, high quality, and I think it's helping step up the quality of the bands up here in Payson as well. So we're I think making a few bit of headway, turning some heads. So
great. Yeah, that's now I got to ask you about a couple of songs that there's got to be some songs out there that were like you listened to and were like, okay, this is a challenge. Like, is there what songs were out there where you thought that there was no way that I can pull this off, and then eventually, got it? That was kind of satisfying.
So what I'm going to do is I'll take that answer in two parts. Number one, let's talk about some of the Rush songs and the drums to the Rush songs. Probably one I remember spending a whole ton of time on early on when I was in Anthem was oh, I've gone blank on it now. Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah. Okay.
And that has just some wacky things going on, especially you get into the 5/4, 7/4 section in the middle, and the drums just get really peculiar.
Mm-hmm.
That one took me an awful long time to nail the right parts. One of my absolute favorite, if not my favorite tunes of all time, is La Via Strangiato. And that one, again, to get that one note for note, which I probably still don't have note for note, that one took an awful long time. And I actually had to pick which version I was going to do. I chose to do the exit stage left version rather than the studio version. There's quite a few variations in the drum parts in those.
Yeah.
And let's see, Natural Science is another one that was just a whole 7 minutes of insane drums.
Right.
A Farewell to Kings. I remember we used to do that one with you in Anthem. That one, just getting the middle section where it sets up the guitar lead and the guitar lead comes in. That's another one that's just full of very interesting, complicated drum parts and drum and bass working off of each other and stuff. So then what the next thing I'll kind of go into is some of the songs that have been a bit of a challenge for me to learn for OK Hotel. Because like I said, this is the first time I've been doing exclusively lead vocals. And I've really had to step up my game. And Paulie Desimone, I'll go back to my relationship with Paulie. I played with him in the original band Toonsmith. Back in the 80s, Paul played with a band called Nowhere Dreamer, a really good progressive original band that had some backing and made a bit of a run for it. And they actually got some vocal training from a gentleman named Ron Anderson out in LA, who has worked with Axl Rose and Chris Cornell and some of those absolute heavy hitters. And Paulie learned some of his technique, and he passed on a lot of that to me. And it's the technique that Chris Cornell uses and Axl Rose. It's not singing from the throat, it's singing from the skull. Skull resonance, all of this kind of stuff. So I've really had to step up my singing and being able to do it all night long for a 4-hour show. So now some of the tougher ones that I've had to learn there, mostly because of vocal range, we do Like a Stone, Audio Slave, Chris Cornell, of course.
Oh.
I can't do a lot of the Soundgarden stuff because that Chris Cornell stuff is just so up there. It's just way beyond me. But Like a Stone is not so bad. But that one took a while for me to be able to get strong and be able to get without cracking at the end of that tune. And the same with we do Wasting My Time, which is I can't remember off the top of my head Who Wasting My Time Is By. That was another one that was just a vocal heavy song and a tough one for me to do. Let me think some of the other ones. We do Black Hole Sun, of course, Chris Cornell, again, very difficult song. And the drums in Black Hole Sun are no picnic either. So that's kind of what I'm finding myself having to really step up to these days, is some of these 90s rock tunes where the vocals have to be right. Well, in my way of approaching things, I want the vocals to be right. I want the drums to be right. So it's then that second layer of learning both of those parts correctly, and then learning how to do them correctly together. So
right. Was there a transition as far as that goes? Because I mean, obviously, you know, I used to play bass and sing at the same time. So when I would do that, I would associate parts of the song. You know, if I'm changing, I know where the vocal goes. You kind of work out in your own head when you're playing the bass or when you're playing the guitar. This chord change goes along, or the vocals go in between the chord. How did that work with drums for you? Because you do a lot of fills, you do, you know, and obviously keeping a straight beat. But what kind of transition was that? And did you come up with a system to where you can understand, you know, where to come in?
I think what I generally do is I'm learning the drum part separately. I'm learning the vocal part separately, and then I bring them together. I can't do it all at once. And a lot of times, as I'm sure you're aware, as you're putting those two things together, the timing of one doesn't always line up with the timing of the other part. You know, like Black Hole Sun, Chris Cornell wasn't playing drums, so his vocal parts don't always have that much to do with the drum part. So you've got to kind of try and find those places where, okay, I know that I'm hitting the snare on 3, and I know I've got to come in with the vocal part on 3, and it's just a lot of repetition, a lot of practice, and finding how those parts slot together. And like I said, it's interesting because you're not always playing the drum parts. You know, the vocalists aren't playing the drum parts. The drummers aren't singing always.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're not playing Hotel California as you're singing it. It's you're slotting the parts together and figuring out how they work together. And, your brain has to split the two, and it becomes another real interesting challenge. So.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, there's one thing that's also very unique about what you do, and that's noticing other parts. You know, a lot of musicians are going to play their part and they're just gonna play them and that's it. Okay. But as a drummer, I have heard you many times stop in a song and tell the guitar player, wait, that note didn't sound right. And you would also tell the bass player, something's not right there. And I remember us going through it over and over again. And even the guitar player would be like, you're right. How did you hear that? You know what I mean? I mean, that's how tuned in I think you are on so many of these songs, and how your brain is working. You're just not focused on you. You're kind of focused on everything, making sure that it sounds right. And for a drummer to have, you've never played guitar or bass or anything like that before, have you?
I play guitar very badly. I'll put it that way. I actually started a music degree when I was going to ASU back in the mid to late 80s. So I actually have a bit of music theory background and things like that. So there are times when I've got a pretty good ear, and I spend a lot of time listening to these tunes. So there's occasions when I'll turn to our guitar player and say, you're playing a major there, and I think it's a minor, and
right.
And I get called a couple of names, and then next rehearsal,
it's right.
Oh, you were right. So it happens sometimes.
Exactly.
So.
Well, I mean, certainly kudos to you on that, because that just shows your musicianship. And, you've had the opportunity to play with so many musicians out there that I'll ask you, I'll ask you a question that I ask a lot of people now. This has nothing to do with musicians that are out there now, although you can pick some. But if Rob James was going to be in a band, tell me your ultimate band, dead or alive, famous or not famous, you on drums, and pick your other musicians. Who would they be?
Oh boy. My first thought was, what bands do I want to play in? Which there's actually two that I would absolutely love to play for. And that would be Foo Fighters or King's X, two of my absolute favorite bands. But I think your question is a little more about if I was going to put a band together with some of my
Anybody.
favorite musicians,
Right.
it would probably be about 15 or 20 of them. But, so guitar player wise, Guthrie Govan is absolutely one of my favorites. If anyone knows who the Aristocrats are, I'm sure a bunch of the musicians out there know who they are. I just got tickets to go see them in June, I think it is. They're going to be in Phoenix at the Crescent Ballroom. Everyone go see the Aristocrats, the best show you'll ever see. And Brian Beller's the bass player as well. In fact, Brian Beller's been playing with Steve Vai and Joe Satriani. And I just, if I'm putting a band together, I can't put another drummer in there, but the Aristocrats drummer, Marco Miniman, is just the best one out there these days, in my opinion. Just a master of polyrhythms and is just a monster. So anyway, my favorite guitar player is Guthrie Govan, Ty Tabor from King's X, probably, and maybe John Petrucci from Dream Theater. Bass player wise, I gotta say, top of my list, yes, Geddy has always been one of my favorites and is amazing, but Chris Squire always really did it for me.
Yeah.
Just took to the next level. Vocalist wise, Chris Cornell.
Yeah.
Just the best that's ever been, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And there's my short list.
That sounds like a great lineup. I got to tell you, that would be something.
I'd probably be kicked out pretty quick though, so that's the problem.
Are you looking at doing any other original projects? Or, I mean, I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, and I got to tell you, original music, something out there that's great to do, fun to do, but it's unfortunate that a lot of these places out in Arizona, they want to hear covers. You gotta go with what the people want. So what are your feelings on that?
I mean, I think all of us did original music when we were younger. It was what we, kind of, that was the progression of what we were supposed to do. Yeah. Like you say, Arizona's a bit of a tough sell on original music. If you want to go out and play gigs and play original music, you're going to make less money than playing in a cover band. At least in a cover band, you're pretty much guaranteed $100 a man a night. Doing original stuff, lucky to even squeak by on anything like that. And the other tough thing about originals that I'm not sure everyone really realizes is, number one, you have to have a great songwriter. You can't just sit down, throw down 4 chords and fling together some lyrics. Some people do it. Some people do it really well. But to me, to stand out as an original project, you have to have an outstanding songwriter or two in your band. And then you have to rehearse like motherfuckers. I hope I can say that on your show.
Sure.
But, it's not get together once, twice a week. It's 3 or 4 times a week. You've got to get together and work on that original material for it to be anything really substantial and something that's going to turn heads, which is what, of course, you've got to do. You can go in to a cover project and you go out to a bar and you play a song, you don't even have to play it that great and people recognize it. They're like, oh, yeah, I love this tune. Well, you don't have that advantage as an original band. So, it's a lot tougher, and the rewards seem to be a lot further apart and a lot more difficult to get. So I think I got to a point maybe 15, 20 years ago where I had done the original thing. I did it for a long time. I was part of one or two really, really good projects and had some great times, recorded some albums and so forth, but nothing ever came of it. And then, of course, like musicians and bands, they come and go. They all of a sudden you've spent 4 years spending 4 and 5 nights a week with your original band, and then a couple of guys have a blow up with each other, and boom, it's back to square one.
Right.
And that's
Absolutely.
it's not the same as saying, hey, bass player for a cover band, learn these 30 tunes. It's a lot
Right.
tougher than that. So I think I got to the point where I just decided I wanted to work a little less. I think that was it. And I'd kind of gotten over the idea that I was going to make it big in the music business. I think all of us got there at some point.
Yeah.
Some made it. That's great. A lot of us, never had those breaks and never had the magic stars align like that. So I decided to keep going with cover projects because I could stay busy, I could have fun, and I didn't have to be out rehearsing 4 nights a week. So,
Right. Yeah. No, I completely agree. Completely agree with that. Everything you said. Let me ask you this then. Who have you met that has really starstruck you as far as a musician goes? I know you've met quite a few.
I really haven't met that many people.
I thought you did. I mean, I know you used to travel a lot, and I know you were always talking about that you met some of these people. And I got to tell you, it was some people that I've never heard of, but you were really, you seemed to be really, into a lot of these groups like King's X. I knew you were into them for quite some time. And a lot of other bands that you would talk to me about that, that I never heard of. I didn't really know. And it shows your vast knowledge of music. But have any of them really stuck out to you as far as when you met that you were starstruck by?
I guess so King's X, you mentioned, practically every show they do, they stick around after the show, they meet the fans, they sign autographs. One of the only bands I've known that have done that consistently all through the years. They're just absolutely incredible to their fans. They're down to earth guys. They're really cool. And it was great to meet them. But I try not to be a gusher, I don't want to be, I think I realized early on that Neil Peart hated when somebody would meet him and just be just completely starstruck and gushing over him and all of that stuff. He hated that stuff. So I think I kind of became conscious that not, the guys out there, they don't really care for you to just tell them how you think they're the greatest thing on earth and everything. So, when I've gone to meet King's X after the shows, shake their hand, take a picture, tell them they're great and kind of move on, Yeah. So it's not like I've really put myself in a position of spending a lot of time with any deep conversations with any of my idols. If I had the opportunity, I absolutely would. But the opportunities haven't presented themselves. We're here in Arizona, and I think there's less opportunities than in some other places to do such things. So
very true. Yeah, and I know that I was around a lot of people in when I, growing up in Chicago. There was a lot of opportunity for me out there, and there was a lot of people that I had met, out there with hanging out with Styx for a while, and hanging in Chicago, and when I met Crosby, Stills and Nash, and a lot of the people out there that were just really cool, and that is something that I've noticed is that a lot of them just want to talk, you know, they don't want to sit there and listen to, oh, I love you, man. I think you're great. I love the way you play and this and that. They just want to talk to you, and
Yeah.
Neil was definitely like that. And I certainly understood that from, very early on, that it's just something that even though you may be starstruck, you just gotta talk to him like a normal person, and
Like a
it
normal
works
guy.
out
Yep.
well. Right.
Yep. Now, I guess what I did have a couple of really neat opportunities. At one point, my wife Kim was doing the basically producing the music section of one of the local music magazines, art magazines. Not New Times, but it was another one of the free ones. Uh, I'm not going to be able to give him a plug, unfortunately. But what was great was we spent like 3 or 4 years being able to get free tickets for any show we wanted, and get a lot of interviews as well. So now my wife, she interviewed like so many of her idols. It was just insane. And she got some really cool interviews. I did get to interview, and this was just on the phone. I interviewed Stuart Copeland, which that was really cool. And I interviewed Les Claypool. And
Wow.
was I didn't get the opportunity to see Les. I was going to go see the show he had put together. I think it was just a Les Claypool solo album he had done. And I think I was going to go meet him after the show, and then got a kidney stone issue and never made it to that show. So,
Wow.
Story of my life.
Yeah, I get it. Believe me, I get it. I have the same issue. Oh, and what did you think of that then when Les Claypool doing the Farewell to Kings album? What did you think about that?
I thought it was a very interesting thing, and I understand those guys are massive Rush fans. I'd read a story way back when their second drummer had joined Primus, and he said the audition was just them sitting around jamming a bunch of Rush tunes, so I knew they knew that stuff inside and out, were huge into Rush. But I couldn't see Les Claypool singing Geddy Lee. And
Right.
I went and watched a couple of the videos of them doing it live, and the musicianship was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I just couldn't wrap my head around Les Claypool singing Geddy Lee.
Yeah.
It was a little off the wall, honestly.
I felt the same way. Kudos to them for giving it a shot and, playing music of their idols and doing the whole entire album. I thought was awesome. And the music again was great, but yeah, that's just something that is an odd choice of, Les Claypool doing Geddy Lee. Just didn't seem like didn't seem right.
Yeah. I mean, obviously at some point they said, we want to go out and play a Rush album for people. And they did it. They chose one of the absolute best Rush albums, Farewell to Kings, just
right.
Top-notch stuff. But yeah, I didn't get I didn't really pursue going to see that concert. So,
Yeah, understood. All right. Well, Rob, I do appreciate you taking the time out to come and sit with us and talking about everything that you've been doing out there. And again, for everybody out there, when you get to see Freewill, it's amazing. The show is amazing. The musicianship is amazing. And you know what? Not only that, a great bunch of guys. The three of you guys really have really done a lot for the music around the Valley, and have done so much with the songs and how you play your music and how you take your craft and really hone into it. So if anybody gets an opportunity to see Freewill and any of the other projects that you're doing out there, definitely please do. So I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you doing this for me, because again, we go back quite a ways, and it was a pleasure playing with you, jamming with you, and you playing on one of my songs. So hopefully we'll get to do this again when you have another project coming up, and we'll get together, and hopefully we can also get together, maybe do a jam or two. We'll see what happens down the line. But thank you for joining us.
That sounds great. Hit me up. Hey, Anton, it's
Yeah.
been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for all of the kind words. It I love playing with Freewill. They're a wonderful bunch of guys. Um, I certainly couldn't be there without those two guys filling out everything and making us sound as good as we do. Um, it's been so cool playing with all of the musicians from the Valley that I have, yourself included, being able to do your original tune. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Rob. Thank you very much. And for those, all of you listening, thanks for joining us, Living in the Limelight podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, and we're also looking at other venues. So just keep up, subscribe, share as much as you can, help out as many musicians as you can out there, because we're kind of out there doing it for you. Certainly not in it for the money, I can tell you that. But get out there and support any musicians that you can. So thanks again, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you for joining our Living in the Limelight podcast with your host, Anton Scholl. Please feel free to comment, like, follow, share, and subscribe, and also add us to your playlist on your favorite streaming sites. Thanks again for joining, and we'll talk to you again next week.